Howdy. Hello. Good evening. We're doing another nighttime installment of The Golden Bough. Back with me is producer Jordan. Jordan, thank you so much for joining us. Uh, I know that it was quite a difficult task to read all 4 pages of what we're going to be covering tonight, wasn't it?
Oh, yes, but, I know you're going to cover much more than what's contained in just those 4 pages. There's a lot of jumping off points in that
Yeah,
short chapter.
yeah. I because it was such a short chapter and there was a short turnaround, I took the opportunity to speculate, to wander, to delve into some subjects that had come up since the last time we had done one of these. For those who are following along at home, we're going to be looking at Chapter 11, The Influence of the Sexes on Vegetation from the Abridged Golden Bough by Sir James George Frazer. But that's not going to be the only thing that we're going to talk about. You see here that we have some images that are going to be relevant. We've got
Mhm.
one of my favorite programs on the internet. We have Jeffrey Mishlov's New Thinking Aloud, and this character that is next to him is Jacques Vallée. I'm preparing something with my friend Rachel where we're going to be discussing several of Vallee's books, but specifically Passport to Magonia. Um, so I'm going to connect that. I'm going to kind of kill two birds with one stone with that. Also, we're going to be talking about atomic weapons, and I have long wanted to do some analysis and some decodes of the Oppenheimer film, Oppenheimer in general, the Manhattan Project, and I stumbled into something. I realized that there was a connection to the Sacred Grove in the Manhattan Project. So I was like, okay, this is going to be a perfect opportunity to go into that. And yeah, I think without further ado, we should get into it if that's okay.
Sounds great.
All right. So I'm just going to read this at the top. In this presentation, we delve into Chapter 11 of James George Frazer's The Golden Bough, exploring ancient vegetation rituals that intertwine human sexuality, fertility, and sacred groves. We're also going to talk about effigy burning and tree worship, which aim to ensure bountiful harvests and purge misfortune through fire's purifying power. They'll be relevant to the consideration of the Manhattan Project, but we've talked about that in previous installments. Tonight, it's going to be spicy. This is the most sexual thing I've ever done on the internet, and it's going to be about vegetation rituals. So that's primarily the focus of what we're doing. But in the back half, we'll get into that purifying power of fire. We'll examine how these rituals resonate with archetypal narratives of creation, destruction, and renewal. As a sidebar, we'll consider Jacques Vallée's provocative hypothesis in Passport to Magonia, which draws parallels between fairy folklore and modern alien encounters, suggesting both may reflect the collective unconscious manifesting otherworldly archetypes. We'll conclude by connecting these themes to the Manhattan Project, particularly the 1942 Bohemian Grove meeting and the Trinity test, named after John Donne's Holy Sonnet 14, where the nuclear fire planned in a sacred grove inverts Frazer's fertility rites, devastating New Mexico's crops and echoing the Edenic fall as the collective unconscious weaves a modern myth of power and consequence. So, if we can go to slide 165, Jordan, I want to put something on the radar of everyone who's playing along at home. Um, I I don't know if you know this, but we have a little bit of a following, and it was brought to my attention through one of our followers that there is an illustrated Golden Bough available on Internet Archive. And that is, I've got it coming in the mail. I'm super excited about this. I have looked often in vain for images that connect to Frazer's text. And oftentimes I end up finding other things that are adjacent. And now I'll actually be able to have slides that um, are were selected by Mary Douglas. This is the general editor, Mary Douglas, and this is what you see when you go to Internet Archive. It's in the background photo here. Although you cannot have unlimited access to it, you have to like check it out or something like that. I didn't want to do that, so I just bought a copy. Um, and so let's go around to these other photos. One of the only photo, since this is such a short chapter, chapter 11, there's only one photo that is in the chapter, and it's this one here on the far right. Um, The caption reads, "Nature is brought to participate in the union of marriage." Let me see if I can enlarge this on my side. At Malay weddings, the relatives of the bride present a sacred tree to the relatives of the groom. Above, a, a native priest sprinkles rice over the groom and his following. This photos by William W. Wilder. And I was like, okay, that's amazing. That's awesome. And immediately it got me thinking, hey, we in America, we still throw rice at weddings. And I told Jordan about this. I was like, think about this. Like, why do we throw rice at weddings? Like, especially since it's like kind of hazardous to birds or whatever. That's what they told us in like the 90s. So we had to stop doing it for a while. Like, what's the connection? And it's this, it aligns the reproductive union, the marriage ceremony with the land, right? That this will somehow make the rice crop grow or something like that. It's a remnant from these ancient festivals that are all over the world, and we're going to talk about those today. And how did you react when I told you that?
Oh, like so many of these rituals that come up in the Golden Bough, I was like, "Oh, yeah." Not totally shocked, but just seeing our culture through this lens and seeing how we're really not immune from or totally distinct from all of the rituals that are being explored in the book. That was really, I
I
think, my
think I
response.
think you said it's like we're swimming in it, right? Like we're so immersed in the environment that we don't even understand the things that are going on around us. It's a perfect example of how much it's actually operating on our minds or in the background, and we never give a thought to it. Um, and it's a great test. Like, I mean, this, if you're listening along, you can be like, hey, did you know that this rice, throwing rice at a wedding is connected to these ancient fertility rites in the land and nature? Like, how would we ever have figured that out? You turn around, you ask people, do you know where this came from? Do you have any idea why we're throwing rice? Is it in the Bible somewhere? Like, no one knows. No one knows. But now you know.
Mhm. Similar to the beauty pageants.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you want to refresh our listeners' memories? Do you recall what we talked about with beauty pageants?
Sure, not too many episodes prior, maybe
I
even the
think I think it
last
was
one,
the
we were
last one.
talking about, yeah, the maypole rituals, and I have not seen the movie Midsummer, but our co-pilot Ostick brought up Midsummer, and I do remember a lot of the commercials for it, but, the festival of they elect a May king and queen, and as we go through the rituals today, there's similar ones in chapter 11 also, but the selection of the woman who most embodies natural beauty or, fertility or whatever it is, is a direct corollary and a predecessor to beauty pageants. And that's
Yeah.
super fascinating. It's not totally surprising, you know,
But now it makes sense, right? Like
yeah,
giving the flowers to the beauty pageant winner, and also flowers going to
yes.
play a role in marriages as well. I imagine that this can be traced to some sort of fertility vegetation ritual, the throwing of the bouquet, right, at marriages, right,
Hmm.
at weddings. But yeah, we talked about Marilyn Monroe being the artichoke queen. That was the first. She was like the first artichoke queen of California, and it's like if there was any doubt that the beauty queen is like a physical instantiation, an anthropomorphic representative of tree spirits, just look at what we put together in the last presentation where Marilyn is just like reaching out and giving you an artichoke, right?
Well, and to me, that is likely a CIA and Friends brought to you by
We'll see.
implementation. Maybe not, I don't have direct evidence of this, but knowing about Project Artichoke and knowing anyway, these symbols are so fascinating because they're pervasive in culture, they're pervasive in social engineering programs, they're pervasive in so many different things used for maybe what we could consider subjectively good and bad ends. I would say the symbolic language itself permeates everywhere. And it does seem to interact with our subconscious mind in really interesting ways.
Yeah, I mean, I think the question is how many more rituals are we completely immersed in that we are totally unaware of?
Yes.
You don't have to think too hard about it. Like, think of other formal events, like what's going on at graduations. Why are we wearing robes? Why are we wearing mortar boards? Like, what's going on there? Like, why are the days of the week named what they are? Like, what's happening on those days? Like, there's so many different things. This I only have 10 slides, but I can see that um, we're gonna have a lot of things to talk about. I do want to perhaps I should address the elephant in the room here, Mr. Sergeant Pepper, Aleister Crowley.
Yeah.
Aleister Crowley has come up throughout this seminar that I've been doing because I've been trying to understand if there's any connection between ceremonial magic and John Dee and the magic that Frazer talks about. And it's like, oh, no, 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 this is a completely different type of magic. Don't even try to conflate these. And the more I get into it, the more I'm like, I don't know if the lines are so clear, especially, we're going to be talking about sex a lot tonight.
Hmm.
And, what is Aleister Crowley known for? He's known as this purveyor of sex magic. So what's the difference between the sexual rites and rituals that are connected to vegetation in the land that come up in these different tribal communities? What Aleister Crowley was doing um, in the 20th century, and all the events that were perhaps connected with sex magic. I'm not going to get into it, but if the Babylon Working Project, and which you know these there were so many technological leaps made in the 20th century that had like occult figures in the background. You have to wonder like what was going on with sex magic. So I did a little bit of research into this, and there is a distinction between, and I'll read to you what I've got here on the distinction. I want to see how it flies with you. So um, Frazer's The Golden Bough describes vegetation rituals like mock marriages and field copulation in chapter 11, communally ensuring crop fertility through tree spirit veneration. Unlike Aleister Crowley's sex magic, which uses structured esoteric rituals for individual spiritual transformation, Frazer's public folklore based practices focus on agricultural survival, while Crowley's private tantric inspired rites target personal enlightenment. Both reflect Jungian archetypes of fertility, but Frazer emphasizes collective nature connections, whereas Crowley's prioritizes occult power. So I think, just to put it in my own words, the it seems like the difference is personal enlightenment versus collective boon or collective yield from the fertility rites that are engaged in here. How do what do you think about that distinction? I'm not.
Well, I'm no expert
Yeah.
on Crowley and his implementation of magic. I'm aware of, but I would not say I'm an expert in that area. So I can't speak too deeply to what he is or is not doing. When I think, though, of what he was collaborating with Jack Parsons to achieve, that makes me think there is an expected global or universal or wider spread impact, even if the rituals themselves are done in private and in a small group and likely have very meaningful personal transformations involved. It's hard for me not to think as above, so below as a tenet does not apply here in his mind, but I'm not certain. And then when we think about a lot of, I would say, music videos today, there are a lot of these symbols being inserted and played out, and I would guess are Crowley inspired in a way, though we're kind of taking a step back and looking at this bigger lineage, this bigger tradition that includes the Golden Bough, and we talked at the very beginning of this series and speculated really on how Crowley might fit into that. But nonetheless, I can't draw necessarily clear link story if that makes sense. But we're talking about, these symbols kind of emerging, possibly even naturally, throughout reality. So anyway, that's my take. It's hard for me to not imagine a bigger impact.
Well, I think it's a fantastic point. Like, if you are, I don't know how much I can buy this distinction between uh, the sex magic of the primitive people and the sex magic of Aleister Crowley. It is sex magic. They are engaging in a type of imitative, sympathetic magic. You know, they're they're engaging in sexual copulation in order to harmonize and to energize and bestow some sort of beneficent power upon the agrarian landscape that they live in. They think that there's really no discontinuity between the cycles that are going on within them and what's going on in the nature expanse. So, uh, if it were just for personal enlightenment, as we might be led to believe, then why why are we attaching this to world historical events that affect everyone else? You know, like why are we doing that? This might be done in private, but to say that it's not communal doesn't seem to be accurate. And there's no judgment here. I'm not trying to like in what I'm trying to do here. I'm going to be talking about the Bohemian Grove. I'm going to talk about all this. I'm not trying to judge anyone or expose anyone. Like I'm kind of just coming at this academically. So there's no hate here. I'm searching for clarity on this.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, for sure. I think too, we talked about this at the very beginning of the series. It comes down to as well, and I don't know how much of this is Frazer's actual opinion versus, we see with Young even sort of a shrouding of some more out there perspectives to fit a little bit more within the academic environment they find themselves in. But this distinction between, modern Western magic, if that's what we want to identify Crowley with, and this primitive magic, we see sort of a projecting onto the quote primitive magicians on what their interior life is really like.
mm.
And I'm not sure we actually know, if that makes
Right. I
sense.
mean, that's been an abiding critique of what Fraser's been doing here this entire time because you know, he's confronting a lot of case studies and not the people themselves. Right. There's a lot of armchair interpretation. So,
Right. And the very nature of sympathetic magic is this quote hermetic principle of as above, so below, this mirroring within one's interior with the exterior, changing the contents of one's self to get a desired result in the outside. So to me, that almost implies that there is this inner transformation happening as well, even if it is maybe not in the psychoanalytical in like context that we speak of, therapy and things like that today being a part of.
well, I'll put a little asterisk by that because Fraser doesn't speculate too much about the psychology of the individuals performing this stuff outside of, you know, the outcomes that are viewed
Right.
as desirable, but perhaps they have a lot more in common than we're led to believe. I think we should go to the next slide if that's possible.
Yeah, of
Yeah.
course.
So the next two slides, for those of you who've been following along with us, like I, it gets pretty repetitious with all the different instances that Fraser gives us. I have broken down the types of sexual rituals that are involved in these vegetation rites into two categories: those that involve sexual activity, and then there are others that involve abstinence. Okay, and I'm going to keep these up here, but I'm just going to go through all the ones involving sexual activity, and then we're going to bring Jordan back in to comment because she's better to listen to than me. All right, so chapter 11 discusses, this is going to be the first one, how ancient European spring and summer festivals involve personifying vegetation powers as male and female, using imitative magic to promote plant growth through rituals like the mock marriages of figures such as the May, King, and Queen, as Jordan brought up earlier. These ceremonies were not merely symbolic, but were believed to be charms to ensure the growth of trees, grass, corn, and flowers. The closer these rituals mimicked actual marriages, the more effective they were thought to be. Sexual promiscuity, often associated with these rites, was likely an intentional and essential component, reflecting the belief that human sexual unions were necessary for the fertility of vegetation. While such explicit practices are no longer common in modern Europe, similar customs in other parts of the world and lingering European traditions suggest these rituals are remnants of this ancient belief in the connection between human sexuality and agricultural fertility. So, I believe the second one here we have here are the Papules of Central America. And men abstained from their wives for 4 days before planting, then engaged in sexual activity the night before sowing as a religious duty prescribed by priests, believing it necessary for successful planting. This reflects a belief that human reproduction mirrors and enhances plant reproduction. And then we have Java. In Java, couples engage in sexual intercourse in their fields at night during the rice bloom season to promote crop growth. And in the Leti Sarmata and other islands near New Guinea and Australia, the sun is revered as a male principle that fertilizes the earth, represented by a lamp and a sacred fig tree. During an annual festival at the start of the rainy season, a ladder is provided for the sun's descent, and sacrifices, feasts, and public sexual unions under the tree symbolize the mystic union of sun and earth to ensure rain, abundant crops, livestock, and human fertility. In the Babar Islands, a flag depicting a man symbolizes the sun's creative energy. These practices are not mere indulgences, but are deliberately organized as essential for the fertility of the earth and human welfare. And something I thought about, Jordan, while putting this together, it recalled our conversation on Auden's moon landing poem, where we were trying to understand why the Apollo missions were named after a sun god going to the lunar body. And I think we thought perhaps there is something about sexual congress going on here with the naming conventions. Do you recall that?
Oh, yes. I think that's very much in play. You have the merging of the masculine and the feminine, whatever energies,
Yeah.
beings, whatever. Also, I mean, we could spiral on. We covered it, I think, in the autumn poem analysis. But this idea, I mean, you've rockets look like dicks,
Yeah.
like it goes on and on and on. And then craters on the moon being like symbolic of, like like the yoni and receiving. I think that one's pretty in your face, personally.
Yeah. I mean, if this is a very academic conversation, you might want to say something like member or
Oh, okay. Okay.
I'm just
I'll
kidding.
work on
I'm
that.
just kidding. I don't
Um,
know what the appropriate term is for the genitalia.
yeah, but it does feel like a contemporary modern fertility ritual. I did want to bring up, I know we spoke about this earlier, but with the Surmata, New Guinea, Northern Australian ritual, talking about the fig tree, they you already mentioned they put the ladder up against this rock. They also, I think, put beheaded people on the rock prior to this, unless I'm conflating different rituals. But the ladder itself had 7 steps specifically, which I found really fascinating because there are some corollaries within our Western culture of different concepts, a Jacob's ladder, but the 7 rung ladder is something we have as well. And then fig trees seem to appear in all sorts of different stories. And you mentioned it might be a corollary or an allusion really to the apple in the Garden of Eden, might have actually been a
I think
fig.
there's some debate about whether or not the forbidden fruit was a fig. But
Yeah.
I don't know enough about these cultures and how much they carry forward that biblical story within their own communities, if at all.
Yeah. I just
But
found the compare like the fact that it emerges in multiple cultures, which is a pervading theme throughout the Golden Bough, of course. But I was just very taken by the specificity here.
Yeah. All right. Oh yeah. Okay, this would be great. In Amboina, when clove plantations show signs of a poor yield, men visit the plantations at night naked and perform symbolic acts to fertilize the trees as they would women, calling out for more cloves to boost fruit production. Um,
I did find the calling out to be quite
yeah,
funny. Like I was
more
imagining
cloves.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
More clues. Yes,
Uh,
because saying so is going to like encourage the vegetation to produce more.
I mean, hey, it must have worked for them. They keep going with
Mm,
this.
yeah. Well,
In
and you have all
contrast,
those studies about how plants can hear music and things like that. So,
yeah. In contrast, among the Baganda of Central Africa, a barren wife is often sent away because she is believed to hinder her husband's garden fertility, reflecting a perceived connection between human and agricultural productivity. And
hmm
conversely, Baganda parents of twins seen as highly fertile are thought to enhance the fruitfulness of plantain trees, their staple crop. After twins are born, a ritual is performed where the mother places a plantain flower between her legs and the father knocks it away with his genitals, symbolically transferring their reproductive power to the trees.
yes.
The parents also dance in friends' gardens to further promote abundant plantain yields. So this is getting spicy.
Yes. I believe Fraser used the word member to
Yeah,
describe it.
yeah.
Yeah.
In Ukraine on St. George's Day, which we know is April 23rd from the last installment, a priest blesses the sprouting fields, after which young married couples lie down and roll together on the sown fields to promote crop growth. And in parts of Russia, women roll the priest himself over the sprouting crops despite mud or obstacles, and resistance from the priest prompts complaints from the community, who believe his participation ensures a bountiful harvest. In Germany, during harvest, men and women who have reaped corn roll together on the fields, likely a toned down version of older, more explicit rituals similar to those practiced by the Pipiles of Central America and Javanese rice cultivators aimed at imparting fertility to the fields. So, those are all the ones that involve um, uh, in, sexual activity to promote uh, a bounty.
hmm
Fruit of the loom, fruit of the womb.
Oh, interesting. I haven't thought about that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, see, I think that's another example, right?
hmm
Like that play on words we have was like, what is this? We have this famous Mandela effect, right? With is it fruit of the
Sure.
loom, fruit of the womb? But it's piggybacking on that idea of human reproduction
Well,
and a bountiful harvest.
yes, you have the bountiful harvest and the cornucopia, like that contains the harvest is almost like this womb symbol.
Well, well, and that's interesting to think about. I don't know if you know this with the Mandela effect, that cornucopia is has never been present on the logo
Right,
of
right,
Fruit of the Loom.
right.
So that's interesting.
Hmm.
I wonder if our little internet outage was a message. Better not talk about this stuff.
We're getting a little too
A little too
too
close
off
to the
book.
sun.
Oh, yeah.
I, no one cares, guys. I have like 40 views a video. All right.
I don't know, this one's spicy depending on how you title it.
Yeah. No. Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. All right. Let's go to the abstinence ones. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So, the belief in a sympathetic connection between human sexuality and vegetation fertility leads different cultures to adopt opposing practices to achieve the same goal of enhancing crop growth. While some cultures engage in sexual activity to promote fertility, others practice abstinence. Some believing that engaging in sexual activity promotes the multiplication of plants and animals, leading to rituals involving open sexuality. Others believe that abstaining from sexual activity conserves energy, which can then be transferred to enhance the reproduction of plants or animals, resulting in practices of strict chastity. Thus, the same fundamental belief in a sympathetic link between human and natural fertility leads to either profligacy or asceticism, depending on the cultural interpretation. So it's interesting, right? Like you think somehow you're disseminating your sexual potency by having all this sort of open sex, but then also like you are conserving it and transferring it to the environment if you abstain from it, right? I think that's pretty interesting. And we have, again, an index of all the different examples. I've got 5 short ones here. The Indians of Nicaragua abstain from sexual relations, salt, cocoa, and chica, which is a fermented maize liquor, from sowing to reaping maize, treating the period as one of strict abstinence. Similarly, some Central American tribes like the Quechua, Laquineros, and Cajaboneros observe continence and dietary restrictions before sowing maize, lasting 5 to 13 days. In Transylvania and Kalotaszeg, Hungary, men avoid sleeping with their wives during sowing to prevent crop issues like mildew. In Central Australia, a Kaddish headman abstains from marital relations during rituals to promote grass growth, believing any breach would hinder sprouting. Likewise, in some Melanesian islands, men avoid their wives during yam vine training, as breaking this continence rule is thought to spoil the garden's yield. Right. So I think that pretty much covers it. I have one more little paragraph here, but Jordan, if you want to say something.
No, I feel satisfied.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, in closing, for primitive societies, chastity is not driven by moral or spiritual idealism, but by practical, concrete goals. The savage restrained sexual impulse is not for purity, but to achieve specific outcomes, such as ensuring food security or victory in war. Examples show that when the instinct for self-preservation, securing food, conflicts with sexual instincts, the former takes precedence. Similarly, warriors and their communities may practice sexual restraint to gain an advantage in battle. While these beliefs, such as chastity, promoting crop growth, or military success, are fallacious to modern understanding, I don't know about that. Well, they may have inadvertently strengthened character by fostering self-restraint. This ability to sacrifice immediate pleasures for future goals enhances individual and collective resilience, potentially culminating in heroic acts of self-sacrifice for ideals like freedom and truth. So that pretty much covers the 4 pages that we had going on today. I guess in the martial context, I was like, there's this whole thing about how like prize fighters and boxers and things like that, the whole no-fap community is based on this idea of like not of conserving your sexual energy. But it has
Sure.
not so much, that doesn't really have so much to do with the syncretism between yourself and an outcome. It's so that you actually like build up your testosterone and your strength and so you can succeed in combat. So just interesting.
Yeah, that is an interesting corollary.
Yeah. All right. So you ready to get into the schizo portion of the presentation?
Yes, please.
Okay. So we talked about Jacques Vallée. I've got these 2 current hyperfixations. And yeah, we don't get so much about. So essentially, I've been doing these. I think I mentioned at the outset, I've been reading Passport to Magonia and Confrontations, and I also completed the Invisible College. I do all these things over Audible. And I Passport to Magonia, I think if anyone were to begin with Jacques Vallée, they should start there. Because it's outside of this like endless documentation of all these different UFO cases. He kind of makes the case there that this is against the extraterrestrial thesis, right? That essentially this phenomenon of UFOs has been with humanity from the beginning. And we're not talking about aliens and little green men. We just call them different things at different times. And he has one section that investigates the encounters with fairies, especially in like medieval times and prior to the 20th century, which when this was pretty common, and people were documenting fairy rings and things like that. You see up here in the top right hand corner, you have a fairy ring around this tree, and this is a great painting by Richard Dadd. Come unto these yellow sands. I particularly enjoyed that, and there's lots of different. I didn't really know what fairies were like. The only thing I really knew about fairies was like Tinkerbell, but there's a lot of commonalities that say alien abductions and abductions by fairies have in common. Air quotes documented cases of like livestock mutilation and things of this nature. Fairies are not necessarily these beneficent creatures, but it seems like these fairy rings have something in common with the modern understanding of aliens being extraterrestrial, with these like crop circles, especially that you see in like England and other wide open agrarian places. England's not the only place, but they seem to particularly happen there. So I just thought this was interesting, especially in the context of all these sacred grove and animism ideas in regards to the sacred grove that we've been talking about for the past couple of weeks, and how there is all this veneration of tree spirits, and how tree spirits may actually have a physical form uh, when along a long enough scale of time. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention. What do you think, Jordan?
Oh, I have many, many
Yeah. Well, why don't you talk about it a
things to
little bit?
say. Well, years ago, I read Jacques Vallée's Dimensions, and I'm not sure if it comes up in Passport to Magonia, but he also talks about angels
Mm-hmm.
being part of this phenomena.
Yep.
So that sort of ties back to the John Dee
Of
and
course
Edward
it does.
Kelly.
Of course it does.
Hmm.
Yeah.
What are we talking about when we talk about quote angels? And my understanding of all of this is there are octaves, just like there are octaves within humanity, even octaves within myself. There are moments where I am perhaps operating more as a higher, lower density being, and there are moments where I'm operating as maybe a heavier, more dense being, as a, I guess, metaphor of sorts. So, these creatures that we know as fairies, many people who connect with them and channel them understand that there are quite a variety. They can be quite feisty, and
No,
they don't always present themselves as these beautiful creatures. Is everything okay?
yeah, I just want to make sure I didn't pull the cable out of my microphone.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think, as long as you're hearing me okay.
Yeah, you sound fine.
Yeah. I mean, there's lots of different, we call them fairies, we call them angels, we call them aliens, right? They're going to be something else, depending on the epoch that you're in. Valet, I have a little writing about what Valet says about this, and I have a lot of questions that I hope to follow up with
Mhm.
in when I do this interview here in the next week or so. But Valet offers this. In Passport to Magonia, Jacques Vallée argues that UFO sightings and fairy encounters in folklore are manifestations of the same phenomenon, a non human intelligence that adapts its form to cultural contexts. Fairies in medieval times, aliens today, potentially as a control system to influence human consciousness. He highlights similarities like abduction, strange lights, and psychological transformations in both, suggesting an interdimensional or symbolic reality rather than literal extraterrestrial visits, with historical cases, as you mentioned, like John Dee's angelic interactions, mirroring modern UFO experiences, challenging simplistic interpretations and emphasizing profound cultural and psychological impacts. So, what exactly it means for these fairies, these angels, these UFOs to be part of a control system, I have a lot of questions about it. Like, ultimately, are we talking about the collective unconscious as it interpenetrates like all of reality, which I think Jung allows for, to have these different manifestations that actually seem to create a mythology and introduce it into humans for purposes that are perhaps quite beguiling to us. I don't know. I don't know exactly where this is going to go, but I think Valet is very influenced by Jung, and I have a feeling that that might be the part of the answer to this.
Yeah, perhaps in general, I take a why not both approach whenever contemplating, is this a literal phenomenon or is this a like projection of the subconscious phenomenon? I tend to think both are happening, but
Yeah, yeah, totally, totally. All right, that's enough of that. Like we're
no,
40
no,
minutes
no.
in. Oh, you want to say something else?
Yes, I wanted to bring up that fairies are very much tied to vegetation spirits, and a lot of the folklore around fairies and understanding about fairies is it's part of their job to wake up nature when we approach the spring. And a lot of the
Ooh,
rituals we've been talking about are rituals about specifically encouraging the vegetation to grow. And fairies are another one of those. Both, there's stories of them that just being their purpose, their job, part of what they do. But there's also lots of folk magic about kind of appeasing the fairies so that a favorable outcome through nature can occur.
I love that. Yeah, Fraser is going to talk a lot more about fairies, like in the next 100 pages or so. Not a
Hmm.
lot more, but he's going to refer to them in passing. So this is not going to be our last tango with fairies, but the timing of it was such that I felt like I should make a slide on it today.
Well, thank you for letting me interject.
Sure, sure. Sorry to cut you off. All right. Let's go to. Oh, I just thought this is just an interesting curiosity. Have you ever heard these green children of Woolpit?
Mm-mm.
It made me wonder if like they were kind of a manifestation of this, but like in the 12th there's this 12th century English legend from Suffolk during King Stephen's reign, where it's essentially I'll just go off the top of my head rather than my read my notes, but like uh these children who were colored green like appeared to townspeople, and they did not speak English. They spoke some tongue that they had never heard of before. I believe that the boy died pretty shortly after they found him, and they really couldn't understand anything that they were saying. Eventually, the girl lived an adult life. I think they nursed. The only thing she would eat would be like green beans, right? So and over time she developed a larger diet, et cetera, et cetera. But one of the really interesting things about these green children of Woolpit was that they talked about how they were like from St. Martin's Land or something like that, someplace that nobody knew anything about, and that they like lived underground, which is like a big part of this fairy mythology as well. And so it's like this very strange thing of perhaps integration with some sort of tree spirit beings or whatever. I There are lots of scientific explanations like for why they had the green skin, but there's a lot of things that are still quite anomalous about this, like what language they were speaking and why did they have these stories about living underground.
Oh, that's super interesting.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm
yeah.
really stretching potentially here, but I wonder if the Wicked Witch of the West, where this idea of green people
Yeah,
comes from.
why is the witch green, right? And we can go deeper into this, right? Like, I mean, there's lots of different green. We talked about this to some degree. Like, we talked about Robin Hood, and we talked about the
Mhm.
Green Knight. I mean, you could talk about the Jolly Green Giant. There's lots
Yes.
of different remnants of this in our culture. You start thinking about it, you're like, yeah, this is kind of everywhere.
Mhm, and then we get the green little men.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, we
That's
talked
what,
about this last
yeah,
time.
yeah, yeah. This got me into the whole alien thing. Something else I'm looking into, I did not, it's in the other presentation, but I'm looking into the moon eyed people of Appalachia. Apparently, this might connect to this as well. Like with the Native Americans had this contact with these individuals. They were white and these large eyes, but they were maybe connected to the mound building. So you see these fairy rings, you see these crop circles, you see the mound building. Like this might just be something, a changeling that's taking different forms and different cultures and is still operating upon our consciousness.
And you know who kind of reminds me of the description you gave earlier is Amanda Seyfried.
The actress from
Yeah.
Mean Girls.
Yeah, and I don't mean in a negative way at all, but as you were describing the moon-eyed people, she's blonde with blue eyes and these like big, beautiful eyes.
Yeah. I don't know anything about that. I mean, there's some talk. I think some of I think I'm really early on a lot of this moon-eyed people thing, but there's some speculation that they may have been uh, remnants of an expedition by like a Welsh traveler, and
Hmm.
that there were like these Welsh Indians in America that predate Columbus. So maybe we'll see. I'm more inclined towards the fantastical explanation. Although that'd be
Why
pretty
not?
fantastic to hear that there were Welsh people here in the 12th century. All right. So this is where it's going to get really crazy. Let's go to the Bohemian Grove
Oh
slide. So
yeah.
let's go 170.
Are you sure?
Yeah. Like I said, no judgment, guys. I'm not judging. I'm not judging. All right. So I'm just going to riff here a little bit on this slide. Um, there there's a lot of fact and fiction that needs to be celebrated with the whole Bohemian Grove thing. I think people who are like in conspiracy circles like think they have it all figured out what's going on with Bohemian Grove. I don't know. I've never been. I don't know these people. But there's all sorts of crazy ideas. But I mean, in a lot of ways, it just seems like a lot of strange, good old boy humor where they put on these stage plays and have this giant talking owl and do their like effigy of the cremation of care thing. And that might be all that it is. But, because of people like Alex Jones and other individuals, this scenario is supposed to be more frightening than it may actually be. And I guess I get this idea because it involves so many different global elite. But I think a lot of things that are reality are just stage plays. And I you know, and that might be an even scarier thing to contemplate for people, where it's like we're living in at least one layer of reality is like the Truman Show. And why not like have an element to like a containment mechanism where you have a bunch of hooded men out in the forest who are out to get you, right? Like I don't know. I'm skeptical about this whole thing. But what I wanted to do was to see if the Golden Bough could be applied to the rituals that happen out in Bohemian Grove. And it kind of makes sense because it's the people that attend it are like frequently very, Ivy League educated. This retreat, I think, came to existence like 100 or 150 years ago or something like that. So many of the individuals who went there would have been very familiar with the Golden Bough, and perhaps they used the Golden Bough to inform the stage plays that they put on, or if it's a ritual, to put the rituals together. Um, I did find this document called The Bohemian Grove and Other Retreats by G. William Domhoff. And when it's on the CIA website. So it's like the CIA is like, here, read this. Like, now it could be disinformation, it could be disclosure. I think you have to use your own discernment. I've not gotten it too far into it, but I think on the surface, you can say that there's some things that are going on at Bohemian Grove, like mirror some of the things that we've talked about in the Golden Bough, especially the burning of the effigy. We've looked at effigy incineration with the fertility festivals, right? Like where you had like these wicker men figures that were burned, or the Jacks and the Greens, or the maypole is burned, and there's this purification that happens when you do that, whether it's releasing a good or an evil spirit, so the cycle of renewal can happen, right? Um, and clearly it's happening in a sacred grove. That's very interesting. We have animal spirits here that may be a manifestation of the grove. I'm not exactly sure how an owl was chosen. Alex Jones, I think, said that this is Moloch, right? Like this is a symbol of the old, like an Old Testament statue. I don't know about that. Um, yeah. So I just thought this was interesting. I just thought this was interesting and a worthwhile endeavor. I don't know if anyone's ever done that. Like I went on Think Tank and I was like, well, what happens if we apply what Frazer says about magic to what John Dee was doing? Like what happens? And what I realized there with Enochian magic is that there are elements of sympathetic and contagious magic within the Enochian magic, but it doesn't explain everything. So it was wrong, as other people have said, that the Enochian magic has nothing to do with what Frazer was talking about. There are elements of um, imitative and contagious magic in that Enochian magic. I think I effectively showed that, and I think we can do something about similar here.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard for me to think of any format of magic that would have nothing to do with these sympathetic and contagious principles, but maybe I'm limited in my thinking.
Yeah, so it's a little more blurry.
Mhm.
Okay. All right. So let's go to slide 171.
Sure. Well, and another obvious example
Oh,
would be Burning Man.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. You could do an analysis, a Fraserian analysis of Burning Man. You certainly could.
Mhm.
Okay.
But we'll have to settle for Nukes and Bohemian Grove today.
All right. This is this is the thing that I'm not exactly sure how to talk about this. And I'm gonna work through it with Jordan because the thing that got me down this path is I found out that the before Oppenheimer was christened the head of the Manhattan Project, they the Office of Scientific Research and Development got together in September of 42 to meet at the Bohemian Grove. You can see this is an actual image of that, and there's all these military and high-ranking scientists that are at it. You can see that Oppenheimer doesn't look particularly happy to be in this photo, but um, you know, when I found out about that, and it's like, okay, like the Manhattan Project has its roots in a sacred grove, and you start thinking about the Trinity test, like there's a lot of like vegetation elements to it. Um, and am I cherry picking, or is there some sort of symbolic narrative, some sort of archetypal motif or thrust that's like just kind of bleeding through reality that these individuals aren't even aware that they're participating in, that they are slowly disclosing as something that we are to understand and interpret correctly. And this is probably taking a lot of liberties with Jungian theory, but I don't know. Let me just go through some of the ones that we have here. So some of the major players in the Manhattan Project were Vannevar Bush and General Leslie Groves, right? So that, I mean, the fact that like the military man that oversaw Oppenheimer, his name was Groves. Like I was like, this is really crazy, right? That was like one of the first clues to this whole thing. And Leslie Groves was the director of the Manhattan Engineer District, and Vannevar Bush is a major player on the world stage. He's the head of the Office of Scientific Research and Development. There's a great essay that he wrote called "As We May Think." Is that right, Jordan? This individual was highly influential in a lot of the technological development of the latter half of the 20th century. So, yeah, I think you were
Yes,
looking.
like foresaw the internet.
Mm-hmm,
And the way he describes it's really interesting because it's not using the words we use today, but
right. So if you're just like, okay, Luke, that's you're talking about Leslie Groves. I understand. I understand how crazy this looks. You got Bush and Groves. That's all you got. Well, Los Alamos, the headquarters of the Manhattan Project, it actually means the poplars, right? So then we have another element of vegetation. I could see that, can understand if there are eyes rolling right now. But there's also this strong um, motif. There seems to be this strong um, Garden of Eden motif with the Trinity test, right? What kind of And so this is taking us back into a sacred grove situation where we have the splitting of the atom, right? And we have the figure that's in the Garden of Eden, Adam, who is split open, right, in order to create Eve, right? And if you've seen the Oppenheimer movie or read the American Prometheus book, we have a poisoned apple, right? Indicating that there is some sort of like untouchable knowledge that humanity has participated in. Oppenheimer gave his tutor, so it's reported, although there's some people dispute this as mythology, that he gave this poison apple to his tutor, Niels Bohr, and almost killed Niels Bohr in the process. This is how it's displayed in the movie, right? And then you also have um, these like serpentine kind of words, right? The serpent who pleads with Eve to eat of the apple says, "Oh, thou shalt not surely die." But then we also have um, Oppenheimer talking about how he has become death, the destroyer of worlds, and you could it's serpentine in the way that like the serpent himself, by offering this poison apple to Eve or coaxing her into eating it, has destroyed the Edenic world. Not to mention the mushroom cloud is another type of plant in name, right? And it's almost like there are these poison apples that are hanging off of this tree that humanity is consuming. There seems to be some sort of message here about hubris and pride and consumption of things that we ought to have limits and restraint of. We don't necessarily have to have this unending curiosity about reality. So is this a stage play? Like one could argue, oh, okay, this is a stage play that was put together at the Bohemian Grove. It also has this purification ritual. And I'll get into that next because the name of the bomb, right, is Trinity, right? Well, you could make the case that like the Trinity, if the Trinity is pre-existent to the creation of reality, like Trinity is in the garden walking with Adam and Eve, right? Or you could talk about Adam as being somehow connected to the Trinity, maybe, right? Because Jesus is the second Adam. So we have an anthropomorphic God that is a creator, inverted in this case as a destroyer, or maybe there is creation that comes out of the destruction. So I don't know what's going on here. Like maybe this is a stage play that was put together. I don't think so. It's the enormity of it is like too impossible to consider. I think it is more likely that God or the collective unconscious or both of those things are synonymous, is orchestrating a symbolic reality to tell us a story that we ought to be familiar with in order to teach us something, and or to actually function as the purification ritual that is described in the Golden Bough. Or I don't know, maybe it's both. Like maybe, I mean, the reason why I start to think about this is like, I don't know, are atomic weapons what we think they are, right? This is, if you're not skeptical about that, then maybe none of this makes sense. I feel crazy saying this.
No, I actually think you put it together quite intelligently in this little spiel you just gave. We're often talking about how much are people purposefully embedding these symbols and purposefully co-opting these names and rituals and things like that. And how much of it, as you really put it, how much of it is God and or the collective unconscious just playing things out through the material. I I don't think it's possible for me to say in this moment. And it does feel like a blend. It does feel like a natural occurring phenomena that certain individuals lean into. I mean, even when I think of myself, when I, think about what color to wear to, um, evoke a particular energy or mood or tone, or what words I use, or, what day I schedule something on. Like, those are all ways of adding on to it, but there's already these totally uncontrollable forces happening and unfolding, and sometimes they match up, and that's somewhat synchronous. But
I
I
mean,
don't think you sound insane.
I think you have to go through like each one of these things, right? Like a lot of these are choices by the individuals that are involved. And like
Right.
Oppenheimer was not just a pure scientist. Like he had like a deep familiarity with like literature.
Mm-hmm.
and religion and psychoanalysis. Like the fact that he poisoned an apple to give to his tutor, if that's true, his descendants dispute that that's true, but his
But
biographers
the
claim that
story is here, so it
this
almost doesn't have to be true. Like,
he has to know, like he has to be, he's not a stupid guy. He has to know, like, oh look, like that poison apple is super symbolic, and I'm also going to then quote the Bhagavad Gita and say I am death. Like he's got to understand that those major events in his life, which Nolan ties together in the film, might be connected.
right.
Not to mention he's the one he's the one naming the bomb. He's calling it Trinity.
Mm-hmm.
Like he could call it anything. They could just give it a number. They could just say, "Oh, this is bomb 13B," but they're calling it Trinity. And he,
Well, something
as
that comes to
also in the next
mind.
slide, it's from a John Donne poem.
Yeah.
It's and we'll look into the significance of that. He knows that that has so much of a seismic load with it. How he's not like putting this all together. He's like, do. Like I'm just a scientist. Like I'm not going to think about the archetypal essence of all this. That's really hard for me to believe. I like no one
That's
picked
where
up
it's
on this.
probably both. What's something he said supposedly in his trial with the Energy Commission when he was being tried for being a communist. They were asking him if he was red, and he said, "No, I'm pink." Well, what does pink, to those
I
in the
know,
know,
I know
indicate
exactly what
today?
pink means. Yeah,
Illusion,
right. It's a color that doesn't exist.
the color that doesn't exist. It's a visual illusion when light bends around. So I don't know. Perhaps he didn't mean that, but that is a quote that I have known of Oppenheimer since at least I was 17, if not younger, uh, is when I remember reading that book. And it has
Yeah.
always stuck with me. And I think it's a tiny little lens into all of these other things. But I agree with you. I think it's unlikely that he's at least aware of what symbols he's inserting.
Or maybe he's just like, oh, he takes note of him and goes, oh, what a coincidence. Like, I guess I'm like bound up in some cosmic script of reality. Isn't that strange? Let me go back. Let me go back to the science.
Hmm. Yeah.
Like, I mean, and some people, a lot there are like memes, right? Like, he's like so caught up in the arms race, and maybe you had to be there. Like, but he's like after the bomb is dropped, he's like, oh no, what have I done? Like, what did you think you were doing? Like, you knew better than anybody else what would happen.
And what
So
does he really
it's
mean?
yeah, like how could you be like, okay, I'm gonna just make the most devastating weapon ever, but not think about the morality of the thing that I'm involved in.
Well, and you might want to shut me down, but o- the status of nukes, we don't need to debate here.
Uh,
But in addition to that, the mere symbol of nukes, the messaging of it, the usage of it to instill fear and program mass populations is fantastic.
yeah,
It is a fantastic tool for social control.
yeah.
It's a fantastic tool to push mass populations into war. And
But one could
even from
also,
that lens, like, "Oh, what have I done?" Like,
well,
also
I mean, one could
applies
also
equally to
argue it's
that.
a great the symbol of the nuke could be a great way to prevent war too, right? Like
Sure.
like everybody's like, ooh, we can't like think about the if if you if the nuke story is real, like, oh, we better not get into war because they'll nuke us, right? Like, so it could be a deterrent. So all it really has to happen is it has to have that symbolic meaning in the mind.
Sure. I guess it does work both ways. I just think of all of the, fear propaganda and the, "Oh, get under your desk and put your hands over your head," as if these things work the way that they tell us, as if that does anything.
Hmm.
So it's interesting. It works on both sides of the equation.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think it's used for just one thing, but
That's
yeah.
certainly true.
All right. I want to go a little deeper into the symbolism of the Trinity bomb. If we can go to slide
Of course.
172. Gosh, that was so schizo. Okay. this is not unschizo. So this is here's this big devastating explosion.
Mm.
It's definitely a real picture, and um, the uh, the this I found out kind of digging a little bit further into it. I knew it was based off of this John Donne poem, the Holy Sonnet 14. Um, but it's also a nod to Oppenheimer's lover, Jean Tatlock. So Jean Tatlock what was one who actually introduced Oppenheimer to the poems of John Donne and specifically this one. And so it was kind of like a secret wink to be like, hey, I named my weapon after you. Do you like, right? Which kind of could bring back the elements of these sexual rights that we talked about earlier, right? Like copulation and whatever's going on with these fertility rituals. Um, Gosh, let me look at my notes here. So I could talk about the poem. There's a lot to talk about here. Um, we talked about burning the effigies for renewal. Let's look at the poem. Okay, I'm gonna skip to this. John Donne's Holy Sonnet 14, "Batter My Heart, Three-Person God," written around 1610, is a metaphysical poem that encapsulates the speaker's anguished plea for divine intervention to overcome spiritual weakness and sin, using vivid, violent imagery to express a yearning for transformation through God's forceful action. The speaker implores the Christian Trinity, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, to batter, break, blow, and burn their heart to make it new, acknowledging their inability to achieve salvation through their own efforts due to being usurped by sin and betrothed to God's enemy, Satan. The poem's paradoxical language, seeking freedom through divine imprisonment and chastity through being ravished by God, underscores the speaker's desire for complete surrender to divine will, reflecting a deep tension between human frailty and the need for God's redemptive power. The Trinitarian reference to a three-person God evokes unity and divine authority, aligning with the poem's theme of spiritual renewal through destruction, akin to purification rituals. So, Jordan, if I think it'd be great, why don't you read the poem with that background in mind? Do you want to read it? I
Yeah,
think,
sure.
yeah, it's right there on the card.
All right. Holy Sonnets, Batter My Heart, Three-Personed God by John. Is it done?
Yeah, it's John Donne.
Yeah. Batter my heart, three-personed God, for you as yet but knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend, that I may rise and stand, o'erthrow me, and bend your force to break, blow, burn, and make me new. I, like a usurped town to another do, labor to admit you, but oh, to no end. Reason, your vicary in me should defend, but it is captived and proves weak or untrue. Yet dearly I love you, and would be loved fain, but am betrothed to your unto your enemy. Divorce me, untie me, or break that knot again. Take me to you, imprison me, for I, except you enthrall me, never shall be free, nor ever chaste, except you ravish me.
All right, there's a lot going on there. Okay. Like, I mean, it's super interesting, right? He's analogizing the Trinity explosion to the destructive power of God, right? Especially God being able to destroy us when we've in league with the devil, right? Like we're beholden to our sins. He's like, please come and annihilate me and annihilate these contracts that I'm in. So there is this element of it too, right? Like maybe he's trying to say something by naming the bomb Trinity, that like he's somehow in this unholy union with the United States government, that he didn't really know what he was signing up for, and he wants to be like some sort of salvation from this situation. um or but there's a lot going on. Like we can also see why he named the bomb Trinity if he's attributing all these these destructive abilities to God in terms of annihilating one's pride and sin. So it's super interesting. Like, this is the sort of thing where we could do a whole video, if it were my focus, where we could break down this poem as it relates to the atomic weapon. But there's a lot of layers here, and I imagine that given Oppenheimer's sophistication, that he would want us to kind of read between the lines here. And as I was saying earlier, I've got the screenplay from Oppenheimer up here on the screen, where it records an exchange between Oppenheimer and Gene Tatlock, and it clearly shows, although the movie is not reality, that he had an understanding of Jung. There's a reference to Jung in the film. I guess they're having sex, and then Oppenheimer says, wait, I catch my breath watching her study my shelves. Tatlock's unexpected. Oppenheimer, what? Tatlock, for a physicist. Oppenheimer, you've only got a shelf full of Freud? Tatlock, actually, my background's more. And then Oppenheimer interrupts and says, Jungian, right? So this is how he would have learned about Jung. So I think in some way, this may show that Oppenheimer at least had some knowledge of the archetypal resonance of what he was doing, and he would have picked up on that through the study of poetry and psychoanalysis and analytical psychology through Gene Tatlock. I had the opportunity, perhaps I was so sleep deprived, I had the opportunity to ask Kai Bird directly. I was like, did he pick up on any of this? And he was like, pick up on what? This whole Garden of Eden purification ritual that you're talking about? That's crazy talk. But I think he might have. I think he was a sophisticated guy. And perhaps there was a larger message that he was trying to communicate here.
Yeah.
What do I know? I mean, I'm just reading tea leaves, but I know when people name bombs after John Donne, like you go and you check the source. And this is, did you read this poem and you go, oh, that poem's just pretty. I understand why you would name the atomic weapon that.
There's a lot there.
Yeah. What do you think? I mean, I'm kind of throwing this all on you.
I think it's super interesting. I mean, it's interesting too. We opened this conversation with the sex rituals for vegetation, and we have the allusion to Young during a sex scene. I haven't seen the film, so I'll take your word for that. And
I
even
mean,
with
it happens fast. The
yeah,
Young reference happens fast, but I know Nolan knows Young. Like Nolan is a smart guy.
right. And then in this poem, it at least a layer of it is this like sexual repulsion, magnetism, this whole like paradox of, like, yeah, this chastity, this almost anyway, we could go into it deeper. I think you're right. Like this could be a whole analysis on its own, but at least that one layer seems to be present throughout the entire conversation we've had today. But yeah, it's this renewal ritual,
Yeah. Well, it
but it's
seems like it.
messy and dark and destructive too.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, given the destructive power that's attributed to the three-person God by John Donne, which is it's like, I think we have to ask ourselves, like, was the Trinity test like, I don't, was it this opportunity for some type of spiritual renewal on Earth?
Yeah.
And it's not, and this will feeds into the next slide. I don't know the answer, but I think this stuff has to, like, we have to view this on like a metaphysical level. We're not done. There were two other bombs that were dropped, Fat Man and Little Boy. So let's go. So we're not
Okay.
getting away from symbolic effigies being incinerated. So
Yeah.
we know enough from like the Golden Bough that when that happens, that's a really big deal. So you'll see here in this slide, we have Little Boy, which was dropped on Hiroshima, and we have Fat Man that was dropped on Nagasaki, and I always kind of fumble these up. So let me I've got a few notes here, but you know, so we have three bombs, right? The first one's named Trinity. The second one's named, um, uh, uh, was it Little Boy and Fat Man, right? So Little Boy, like that kind of implies innocence, right? So that could be like potentially like the son, right? And the Trinity is like kind of the father figure, and then Fat Man is this. Perhaps that would leave it nothing left for it to be, but the spirit. It seems like there is something Trinitarian going on with these nuclear weapons. Interestingly enough, Fat Man was actually named after a character in Humphrey Bogart's film The Maltese Falcon. So that's where they got the name for that. And knowing a little bit about how alchemical all this is, the birds in regards to mythology are so important. And the falcon was pretty much interchangeable from a Greek mythological perspective with the hawk, and the um, the mythological figure that corresponds with the falcon or hawk is Apollo, which is super interesting from biblical symbolism, right? When we talk about the angel of the abyss, it's super interesting from a historical perspective because this July 16th is like this special, like synchromistic day. Not only did were the atomic weapons or was the Trinity test occurring on July 16th, but also the Apollo 11 launch to land the first crew on the moon. And so there's something Apollonian about this too. And I guess one could argue Dionysian in terms of its destructive aspect. So I don't know if you knew much about this. I looked into potential pagan holidays that correspond with the date of July 16th and the dropping of the Trinity test. There were two minor ones that I came up with that I thought were interesting, although I don't know much about this. But there was the Feast of the Moon that happens from July 12th to 14th, which honored Selene and Diana, and that's very much attached to fertility and vegetation. But also on July 13th, the birth of Osiris. So that might be something worth exploring. But yeah, it's hard to deny that there's not something Trinitarian going on here, in my opinion.
Yeah. At minimum, there's a layer with the naming
Yeah.
that is alluding to these things.
What do you think about this?
Yeah, I think you covered it pretty well.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
God, it's so crazy to talk about this stuff.
I mean,
All right.
I don't think it is. I think the naming cannot be totally by accident. You know, somebody decided to stamp these things into the history books in this way. What it means metaphysically or what it means magically, we can speculate.
I mean,
I
you're
think
not getting
that's
away.
where
Like, if you don't want there to be some sort of symbolic resonance to it, like, why are we naming it Trinity? And then we're gonna have the first one named Little Boy, which is you know, we're talking about, Christ was born a little boy, right? So
sure.
like it's just uncanny.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah.
and nothing would it w- to complete the uncanniness of this presentation. If we go to the last
Yeah.
slide.
Oh, yes.
So I was putting this together. I was putting this together last night, and wouldn't you know it? Wouldn't you know it? In true Truman Show fashion, the Daily Mail decided to run an article on Bohemian Grove. The article was like pretty much nonsensical. It was about like some staff member at the Bohemian Grove who was like trying to sue one of the Koch brothers for
Mhm.
having to like wash his underwear or something in a sink. It didn't make any sense, and I don't understand why it was a headline. But as frequently seems to happen with me, things that I hyperfixate somehow to manifest in some weird way. So I just thought this was hysterical. That's all I
Yeah.
got. That's all I got.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty hilarious you sent this to me. I
Yeah.
I saw it not that long ago, actually. I was like,
Yeah.
"Oh, of course we're gonna be talking about this," and this news article hits your feed.
It's like, why is this news? Like, why is this important? No one needs to know this.
Yeah.
So,
Yep.
there you go.
And, like, this is not a new photo. Like,
Yeah, even you. Well, even I even used the same photo. Not that
yeah,
there are like tons and tons of Bohemian
right.
Grove photos, but
But this is
yeah,
not breaking news.
yeah, it's not worth our time. But all right, that's what I got.
Okay. Well, I look forward to more fairy talk. I look forward to being roasted in the comments about uh, how off our rockers we are about
Uh,
some of the contents of this presentation, but I
No
feel
one
really good
watches.
about
No
it.
one watches beyond 20 minutes anyway. I like how like it was 4 pages, and this ended up being one of the longer ones we've done.
I'm not surprised just because the content itself, and I knew we were going to go into these applications
Yeah,
of the golden bough, is what I will call them.
cool. All right, thank you, Jordan.
Yeah. Thanks, Luke.
All right.